We are constantly sold a very specific, highly manicured version of California. We are shown the sprawling mansions of Beverly Hills, the booming tech empires of Silicon Valley, and the flawless, sun-drenched beaches of Malibu. But the real estate brochures desperately want you to believe that the Golden State is the ultimate American dream. But what happens when you drive a few hours in the absolute wrong direction? If you veer off the main highway, past the overpriced oat milk lattes and the suffocating cost of living crisis, you will violently collide with the shadow side of the map. You will find places where your GPS completely glitches out, where the locals stop talking when you walk into the room, and where the dark, bloody history absolutely refuses to stay buried in the dirt. Today, on The American Exit, we are not looking at the best places to live. We are exposing 6 of the absolute creepiest ghost towns scattered across California. These are the forgotten, abandoned places in America that completely stopped making sense. These are toxic wastelands that smell like decay, completely inaccessible swamp ruins, and towns where the federal government desperately wants you to stay away. This isn't just a surface-level collection of campfire stories. These are brutal case studies in urban decay America, filled with murder history, unexplainable energy, and total economic collapse. If you were planning your U.S. relocation, or simply fascinated by the worst places to live in the country, you need to watch this entire countdown, because the nightmare waiting at our #1 spot will make you question why anyone ever settled the Wild West in the first place. Lock your doors, and let's begin the descent.
Number 6. Goffs, the sun-bleached roadside skeleton. There is a very specific, terrifying type of absolute loneliness that only exists deep within the Mojave Desert, and the tiny, desolate settlement of Goffs is the undisputed epicenter of it. If you believe that living in the middle of nowhere is just a slight exaggeration, you have clearly never attempted to navigate your way to this specific zip code. Goffs was born violently in the late 1800s, operating as a critically vital railway siding for the massive Atlantic and Pacific Railroad. Later, it served as a highly crucial, life-saving supply stop for desperate travelers navigating the legendary Route 66. For a brief moment in history, Goffs had a distinct purpose. It had massive momentum. It had human life. But progress in America is incredibly ruthless. When the massive modern Interstate 40 was officially constructed, it violently bypassed Goffs, and just like that, it instantly severed the town's entire economic jugular vein. The steady stream of cross-country traffic completely stopped, the money instantly evaporated into the dry desert air, and the population plummeted to practically zero almost overnight. Today, Goffs feels significantly less like a functioning town and far more like a bizarre sun-bleached museum standing entirely alone in the brutal, unforgiving desert heat. The most prominent physical structure remaining is an old, meticulously restored wooden schoolhouse from 1914, which now operates as a deeply isolated, highly unusual cultural center. But what the official glossy tourism brochures absolutely refuse to tell you is how overwhelmingly, suffocatingly eerie the absolute silence is out here. There are no bustling suburban neighborhoods. The median house price is completely irrelevant because there is virtually no functioning real estate market left to measure. If you stand in the empty, cracked dirt roads of Goffs right as the sun begins to set, the absolute crushing vastness of the Mojave Desert physically presses in on your chest. It is a highly suffocating type of quiet. It's the specific kind of absolute silence where every single solitary gust of wind sounds exactly like a whispered conversation you cannot quite understand. This isn't a brave town that fought back against modernization. It is a town that simply dried out, aggressively baked in the relentless sun, and quietly accepted its permanent forgotten roadside ghost. If you're tracking U.S. migration trends 2026, nobody is moving to Goffs. They're just driving past it as fast as their cars will allow. Number 5. Chinese Camp. The violent, rusted monument to gold fever. Hidden incredibly deep within the dark, winding, treacherous roads of Tuolumne County lies a settlement that feels exactly like an abandoned Hollywood movie set that the production crew simply forgot to dismantle and throw away. Welcome to Chinese Camp. This specific location violently exploded into existence during the chaotic madness of the California Gold Rush. It was specifically founded by English immigrants who aggressively employed a massive, staggering number of Chinese laborers. Back in the 1850s, it was a wildly thriving, chaotic, and incredibly loud hub housing over 5,000 Chinese miners. It featured bustling storefronts, a massive joss house, and an incredibly dense, vibrant, hardworking community. But as we know from studying the housing market crash history, gold rushes are inherently, fundamentally volatile. When the easy surface-level gold completely dried up and vanished from the dirt, the massive population simply vanished right along with it, desperately moving on to the next rumored claim. Fast forward to today, and Chinese Camp is a deeply eerie, hollowed-out shadow of its former self. The current population aggressively hovers on barely 150 highly resilient, stubborn individuals. The median house prices might look incredibly cheap and attractive on paper, but buying into this specific town means you are buying into a crumbling piece of ancient history with virtually zero modern infrastructure to support your life. Walking through the center of Chinese Camp today is a deeply unsettling, highly uncomfortable experience. You will find massive, overgrown ancient stone ruins, an eerie, completely abandoned local post office, and a random scattering of 19th century structures slowly, painfully decaying under the relentless California sun. But what makes Chinese Camp so incredibly, undeniably creepy is the sheer suffocating weight of its forgotten, bloody history. In 1856, this quiet, unassuming piece of land was the exact site of the first Chinese Tong War in the United States. It was a massive, highly violent, incredibly bloody conflict involving hundreds of heavily armed men fighting to the death. Today, the absolute silence of the town is deafening, but the physical ground feels deeply, permanently saturated with that violent, chaotic past. It is an incredibly stark, brutal reminder that in the wild era of the gold rush, entire civilizations could be built, completely destroyed, and absolutely forgotten in the blink of an eye. If you're looking to explore hidden America, Chinese Camp is a sobering, rusting, highly uncomfortable monument to a gold fever that violently burned itself out well over a century ago. Number 4. Drawbridge. The sinking, forbidden swamp ruins. Imagine a fully functioning town that is actively, aggressively sinking into a dark, muddy, toxic-looking swamp. A town that is completely inaccessible by any modern paved road and is slowly, painfully being digested by the earth itself. You do not have to imagine it. It is entirely real. It is called Drawbridge, and it is easily one of the most bizarre, terrifyingly inaccessible ghost towns in the entire United States of America. Located shockingly close to the massive, hyper-wealthy tech empires of Silicon Valley, Drawbridge was originally established in the late 1800s on a tiny, slowly sinking island located dead in the center of the San Francisco Bay. It was born entirely as a recreational hunting and fishing retreat for the wealthy. At its absolute peak in the 1920s, it proudly boasted nearly 90 cabins, 2 fully functioning hotels, and a booming, highly active weekend population. But here's the absolute terrifying nightmare scenario. There were never any roads built into Drawbridge. None. The only possible way to access the town was by riding a train or by navigating a boat through the murky waters. As the decades dragged on, the surrounding environment turned incredibly violently hostile. The bay water became severely, dangerously polluted with industrial runoff. The vital freshwater supply completely failed and became undrinkable. The ground itself began to aggressively, unstoppably sink into the dark, muddy marsh. One by one, the desperate residents simply abandoned their sinking cabins and never, ever returned. Today, Drawbridge is completely, utterly deserted. It is officially managed as part of the Don Edwards San Francisco Bay National Wildlife Refuge. The permanent population is exactly 0. But the absolute creepiest part? It's strictly, legally forbidden to visit. The remaining rotting wooden cabins are slowly, painfully sinking into the toxic-looking mud. The old train tracks still run directly past the decaying ruins, but no trains ever stop there. If you gaze out across the dark marshlands on a heavily foggy morning, you can barely make out the skeletal, rotting remains of the houses jutting out of the muck. It looks exactly like a terrifying, sunken graveyard. Drawbridge is the ultimate brutal testament to nature aggressively reclaiming its stolen territory. It's a town that the billionaires of Silicon Valley completely forgot, quietly rotting away just miles from some of the absolute most expensive real estate on the planet.
Number 3. Randsburg, the authentic, isolated desert time capsule. Taking the next spot on our countdown is a place that aggressively calls itself a living ghost town, but it feels vastly more like a settlement that was perfectly preserved in amber while the rest of the entire world aggressively moved on without it. Welcome to Randsburg. Nestled deep within the barren, highly unforgiving, baking hot Mojave, Randsburg exploded into existence in 1895 following a massive, highly lucrative gold strike. Exactly like most desperate boomtowns of the era, it was incredibly loud, incredibly dirty, and totally chaotic. Saloons, brothels, and highly violent claim disputes completely defined the local culture. But unlike other temporary mining camps that completely vanished into the dirt when the gold inevitably dried up, Randsburg just stubbornly, aggressively stayed. Today, the local population is a tiny, fiercely independent, highly suspicious group of roughly 70 people. If you're researching affordable living or tracking weird real estate trends, Randsburg is a highly fascinating anomaly. There are practically 0 modern amenities here. Absolutely no gas stations, 0 major grocery stores. But what makes Randsburg one of the absolute creepiest towns on our list is how perfectly, eerily intact the deep past is. When you walk down the single dusty main street, you are literally walking directly through the 1890s. The historic general store, the ancient wooden saloon, the original rusted jailhouse, they're all still standing, remarkably preserved by the incredibly dry, baking desert air. But the entire town is almost completely, terrifyingly silent. It does not feel like a sanitized, fake corporate tourist attraction. It feels raw, incredibly dusty, and deeply, uncomfortably authentic. Visitors constantly report an overwhelming, heavy feeling that they have physically slipped backwards through time. Locals will quietly tell you that the surrounding desert is littered with hundreds of abandoned, incredibly dangerous, unbelievably deep mine shafts. If you wander off the main dirt road, the physical ground itself is a massive, lethal liability. There is an intense, palpable, heavy energy in Randsburg. A creeping feeling that the ghosts of the violent old prospectors never actually left the saloons. The silence here is physically heavy. The isolation is absolute. For the tiny handful of people who still live here, it's a quiet, completely off-grid paradise.
But for an outsider, driving into Randsburg at dusk when the desert wind kicks up the thick dust and the old wooden buildings aggressively groan, it's an intensely creepy, terrifying reminder that the Wild West never truly died. It just got incredibly, terrifyingly quiet.
Number 2. Shasta, the ruined queen of the northern mines. If you drive far enough into Northern California, you will encounter a town that doesn't just look dead, it looks like it was violently executed. Welcome to Shasta. Back in the 1850s, this was not a quiet, sleepy village. It was aggressively known as the Queen City of the Northern Mines. It was the absolute economic epicenter of the region, the very end of the line for massive freight wagons and a roaring hub of absolute chaos. It was packed with saloons, gambling halls, and heavily armed miners flush with fresh gold. It was rich, it was loud, and it was deeply dangerous. But Shasta was built on a deeply fragile foundation. When the massive Central Pacific Railroad decided to aggressively bypass the town in 1887, opting to lay their tracks through nearby Redding instead, Shasta's economic heart was instantly ripped out. The bustling population evaporated almost overnight. The massive brick buildings were simply left to rot. Today, driving through Shasta feels like driving through an eerie post-apocalyptic corridor. The modern highway literally splits the ruins in half. On either side of your vehicle, you are surrounded by the crumbling, roofless brick skeletons of the old commercial district. The state officially maintains the ruins as the Shasta State Historic Park, but it feels infinitely more like a graveyard than a museum. The population is practically zero. There is no cost of living because there is no living to be done here. What makes Shasta so deeply unsettling is the sheer scale of the ruins. You walk past the old courthouse and the ancient jail cells, and the silence is incredibly heavy. The brick walls are slowly being swallowed by aggressive vines and weeds. It is a stark, terrifying case study in urban decay America. It proves that no matter how rich, how powerful, or how massive a city becomes, one single infrastructure decision from an outside corporation can completely erase it from the map. Number 1. Bombay Beach, the toxic post-apocalyptic wasteland. If the actual end of the world happens, it will probably look exactly like Bombay Beach. This is not a traditional 19th century mining ghost town. This is a modern, horrifying post-apocalyptic nightmare sitting directly on the shores of California's biggest environmental disaster, the Salton Sea. Back in the 1950s and 60s, Bombay Beach was heavily marketed as the ultimate luxury getaway. It was aggressively branded as the California Riviera. Celebrities like Frank Sinatra flocked here. Massive marinas, yacht clubs, and mid-century modern homes popped up along the pristine water. But the Salton Sea was a massive, catastrophic geographical mistake created entirely by an engineering accident. With absolutely no natural outlet to the ocean, the water began to heavily evaporate under the brutal desert sun, while simultaneously collecting massive amounts of highly toxic agricultural runoff. The result, the water turned incredibly salty and heavily, dangerously polluted. Millions of fish suffocated and died, their rotting, decaying corpses washing up onto the beaches. The horrific, nauseating stench drove the rich tourists instantly away. The luxury resorts were immediately abandoned. The local economy completely, violently crashed. Today, Bombay Beach is a surreal, terrifying wasteland. The population hovers around barely 200 incredibly stubborn, resilient residents. The median home prices are essentially meaningless because the entire town looks like a bomb went off. If you visit today, you will find entire blocks of rotting, abandoned mid-century houses half swallowed by toxic mud and aggressive desert sand. Rusted-out cars from the 1970s sit decaying in empty, weed-filled driveways. The beach itself isn't made of sand. It is composed almost entirely of the crushed, bleached bones of millions of dead fish. In recent years, Bombay Beach has attracted a bizarre influx of eccentric artists and off-grid survivalists, turning the toxic ruins into a bizarre, dystopian art installation. There are rusted drive-in movie theaters built out of junk and creepy sculptures emerging from the toxic water. Walking through Bombay Beach feels exactly like you have wandered onto the set of a terrifying science fiction movie. The air literally smells of decay. It is the absolute ultimate example of the American dream turning into a horrific, inescapable environmental nightmare.